Hello everyone. In today's lecture we are going to discuss about the entire concept of bad banks. So why is this thing in news? Basically the government has recently announced a guarantee program for the security receipts to be issued by this very bad bank. So before we understand the entire concept behind bad bank, we need to understand as to what is the reason for bringing this bad bank in the picture. So basically, as we know that the Indian banking sector has been reeling under stress for quite some time, and this problem is being attributed, the problem with respect to this stress is attributed to the twin balance sheet problem. So basically what do banks do? Bank takes deposit and then gives those deposits as loans, and the difference between the interest on which the bank has taken the deposit and on the interest that bank is charging for the loans is bank's profit. So between 2007 to 2012 there was an extreme boom in the market, and during that very boom corporates took a lot of loans. However, the schemes and the plans of the corporates did not pan out well, and therefore their balance sheets were down. They had secured a number of losses. So therefore the corporate's balance sheet was bad, and this in turn resulted in the situation, in worsening the situation of the bank's balance sheet, because loans are assets of banks, because loans generate income for the bank, and when the corporates won't be able to pay back their loans, then in turn bank's balance sheet would deteriorate. So this problem was recognized around 2015, and the government had come out with a plan with respect to which can be divided into 4 R's. This is recognition. First, there has to be a recognition that there is a problem of NPAs, non-performing assets, assets upon which the interest is not being received, neither the interest nor the principal is being received by the banks. Earlier banks were actually not categorizing these assets as NPAs. Why? Because when you categorize an asset as an NPA, then a bank has to make a provision with respect to that very asset. For example, if today I say that I am going to secure this asset has gone bad, and maybe the 100 crore rupees that I have given to this very individual will not be realized in near future, then it is a requirement upon the bank to make a provision of some amount from its capital, the capital on which the bank work. For example, then from my fixed capital I have to make a provision of about 1%, that I have to keep that 1 crore rupees aside. In the event that this entire amount is not been realized, I have made certain provisions so as to pay back the people from which I had borrowed money to lend to these people. So during the governorship, RBI governorship of Raghuram Ranjan, NPAs was started being recognizing by the banks, and at that time we got to know the huge amount of NPAs that the banks had accumulated. Roughly at that point in time, about 9% of total banks lending were NPAs, for which means कि बैंक ने जितना भी लोन दिया है उसका roughly 9% loan amount the banks were not expecting to realize. Then the second R was resolution, that now the government has to resolve these stress assets. For that the government strengthens the DRTs. DRTs are debt resolution tribunals. In these very tribunals, the banks do the cases, file cases against the borrowers and try to recover their very amount. And then there was the introduction of the IBC, that is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, so that the value which has been logged into the enterprises which cannot function again, which cannot be restructured again, that could be unlocked. Thirdly, recapitalization. Now this very amount of 9%, this is a very huge amount, and no amount of resolution or recognition or reforms can fulfill this entire loss that the banks have incurred. For that very matter, now the banks needed to be recapitalized. Banks were needed to be given hard money so that they can keep on rolling the economy, and therefore government has till date from 2015 onwards has infused about 3.6 lakh crore rupees in the public sector banks. And then with respect to reforms, basically so that no such future events happen, no such huge amount of NPAs gets accumulated in future, there was requirement of reforms in the banking system. For that very matter, we have also seen that there was recently merger of banks. Prudential norms were brought in so that banks lend prudentially. Then steps were taken towards fraud detection, as we had seen in the case of PNB scam, the Lakshmi Bank thing, and how the banks were going down. It was only because the RBI had started exercising strict supervision over banks and the way that they were lending and the way they were managing their working on a day-to-day basis. So, in relation to this thing, in the process of reforms and resolution, this entire concept of bad banks comes in. Now, a bad bank is nothing but an asset resolution company. Now, what is an asset resolution company? The concept of asset resolution company and the entire legal basis comes from the SARFAESI Act of 2002. So basically, under this very act, what happens is that private entities are allowed to bring up such companies which can take up these NPAs from banks, give banks some lump sum money, and then resolve these NPAs and realize their value. So a bank's task is basically taking deposits and lending those loans. Banks do not have the specialization in order to recover these loans, and sometimes supposedly you had given money to a steel factory. Now you had given about 100 crore rupees to a steel factory. Now this factory has become NPA. Now when bank went into DRT under SARFAESI Act, now the DRT said that okay, now we have given you the charge of this entire factory. Now the bank seeks to recover 100 crore rupees. However, the bank does not know as to what is the value of this very factory and how to enhance the value and to whom to contact so that we can find potential buyers for this very factory. Now this opens up an altogether another realm for the banks to function, and basically it is like bringing banks to actual business functions of different industries to which they are lending. So naturally we cannot expect that amount of specialization from a bank. Here comes the asset reconstruction companies. These would be specialized companies whose entire job is to identify the potential of the assets and to bring a value to them and to find out, chalk out an entire procedure in which best value can be taken out from these very assets. However, the ARCs which were formed, basically these ARCs were not capitalized enough. They did not have that much of money that they can solve this mammoth amount of NPA problem that we were facing, the Indian banking sector was facing. Therefore, there was a need for a government intervention and a need for such an ARC that had that amount of capital and that amount of trust that it can take up these very assets. So therefore, in this very relation, the government formed the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Reconstruction Company Limited. Yes. So this company, like we know that all banks are a company and they are registered under the Companies Act. So first of all, this company has been registered under the Companies Act, and thereafter this company applies to the RBI for license for becoming an ARC, that is Asset Reconstruction Company under SARFAESI Act. So basically the company has been formed under the Companies Act, and the process of RBI issuing license to this very company, this very bad bank that the government has formed, is underway. So in this very company, in this very bad bank, the public sector banks are having 51% of ownership. So the public sector banks have committed around about 6,000 crore rupees in this very bank, and they are 51% owners of this very company. The rest of the capital will be coming on from different financial institutions as well as private institutions, whichever the government allows. So we have already known as to what was the need behind establishing a government-owned ARC. Now, let us see how this bank is actually, how this ARC is actually going to work. As another word to use for this is also known as asset management company. So what will they do? Banks are going to transfer their NPAs to this AMC, Asset Management Company, or the bad bank, or ARC, whatever you want to call it. So this will free up the banks from making provision for these accounts and will free up its capital. So basically बैंक को जो अपने NPA के तरफ जो एक provisioning करनी पड़ती थी, in this very manner banks will be devoid of this very liability of making provisions, जिसके through बैंक की जो certain amount of capital जो कि lock हो जाती है when by making provisions. Once you make a provision, you cannot use that very capital in your other lending processes. And a bank which were already short on capital, and that too in such short that government has to recapitalize them. For those banks, every penny counts. So by transferring these assets to AMC, by actually selling these assets to AMCs, this very capital will get freed up. So this very AMC will pay the bank about 15% of the book value of this very NPA. कि बैंक ने जितना भी लोन दिया है उसका 15% this AMC will pay to the bank upfront. Now what about the rest 85%? For this 85%, this bad bank is going to issue the bank a security receipt. Now, what is the concept behind this security receipt? So as I told you, security receipt is a financial instrument. So for example, the bank is giving an NPA worth 100 crore to bad bank. Bad bank is going to give bank 15 crore rupees upfront, and against the left 85 crore rupees, it is going to give the bank a certificate, also known as security receipt, and say that in future when I am going to resolve this NPA, I will pay you back the value of this very receipt. Now the problem is that who knows whether this bad bank will be able to recover about 85% value. These 85 crores, will it be able to recover or will it not be able to recover? Here comes the government's sovereign guarantee. So the government says that okay, you give the security receipt to the bank, and when this very asset, this NPA gets resolved, whatever amount that the bad bank is going to get out of this very asset, and if that very amount is less than the amount that was promised or that the security receipt was issued about, कि security receipt हमने दी 85 करोड़ रुपीस के अराउंड तक की, कि हमने 85% आपको वापस करने हैं. Now, if the bank supposedly, bad bank, by resolving the NPA, it realized only 75 crore rupees. So the government is going to pay the difference of 10 crore rupees to the individual who is holding the security receipt. Why did I say that to the individual who is holding the security receipt? Security receipt का purpose ये होता है that once you are having this financial instrument, you can actually trade these financial instruments. So the Indian banks are wanting money today. So therefore, once they receive this security receipt, they can go to the market and say that listen, from this very receipt we are expected to generate 85 crore rupees after say 5 years, या जब भी ये NPA realize हो जाएगा. So you just pay us 70 crore rupees today and take the profit of 15 crore rupees. And if this bad bank is able to realize more money out of it, then you will be in turn as a profit. So in this very manner, banks can get ready money from the market which they are in requirement of. And in order to create value in these security receipts and trust in these security receipts, this sovereign guarantee will come into play. But 2-3 things we should also know about these security receipts. Number one is that this security receipt is valid for only 5 years. Why it is valid for 5 years? So that the AMC is under pressure to do this work quickly and not linger on this work of resolution forever. Second thing, the bad bank has to pay a fee for the security receipt to the government. And this fee will increase every year. This is another way in order to incentivize the bad bank. This is negative incentivization, that if you are not going to resolve this thing quickly, then you are going to pay us more money in lieu of this guarantee that we have given you. And then lastly, with respect to government, it is a contingent liability. For example, which means that government does not have to pay the bad bank upfront this 85% amount. It will only come into picture once the asset has been resolved and not before that. So in this very manner, government does not have to make any instant expenditure, and as you know, even the government is light on pocket because of the mammoth amount of expenditure that COVID-19 is demanding in the economy. Now, let us see the challenges that this ARC, bad bank, AMC / is going to face. Number one is mobilizing capital. As you know that the economy is already in downturn and it will be difficult for this bad bank so as to find takers and potential buyers for this very asset. Then it does not addresses the underlying issue. The underlying issue is that banks had given these loans to such entities which defaulted, and therefore banks had to be more prudent. So this was the underlying issue, and if banks do not reform their ways of giving these loans, then again after resolving this NPA we will be facing other NPAs. Then there is no price discovery by the market. Now in this very system, what is going to happen is the public sector banks are going to give these NPAs to the bad bank on book value. However, the assets value might not be equivalent to the book value. For example, today I have given 100 crore rupee loan for an iron ore mill, a steel mill. After 10 years, now when I am asking for that very loan back, and in return of that very loan, I have actually got the mill itself. The bank has got the mill itself. However, now this mill is depreciated. This mill's machinery has also become obsolete, and therefore there might be a possibility that the value of this very mill is low in the market. Had this been sold to a private ARC, then that private ARC would not have committed to the bank the full amount of its book value. Whereas in this very scenario, they will be asking for entire book amount. The security receipt will be of the entire book amount. In this very manner, market discovery of the actual value of NPA could not be done. Then there is a moral hazard. What is the moral hazard? Basically, Raghuram Ranjan says that this might not become a situation that the banks in this very manner start shifting all their NPAs whenever they occur to these ARCs and become free from their liabilities and their responsibilities. So, lastly, the only way to success is that this very ARC works extremely professionally and implements and manages these transfers asset, and this implements this very entire process in a prudent manner and in an efficient manner. A prudent and efficient manner में वर्क करने के लिए ज़रूरी क्या है कि आपके पास एक स्पेशलाइज्ड एजेंसी हो, and for this very manner, under this ARC, under this bad bank, there will be another entity called the India Debt Resolution Company. This is going to be the operational entity of this very bad bank. This will be manned by professionals of different fields, and these professionals will be tasked with managing these assets and finding potential buyers for them. So this is all with respect to bad bank and why it came into picture, because one, twin balance sheet problem, and these very reform measures, the agendas that were set by the government, that is recognition, resolution, recapitalization, reforms, and this is a step in this very direction. Bad bank का concept आता कहाँ से है? From SARFAESI Act in 2002, जहाँ पे ARC, Asset Reconstruction Companies, set up करी जा सकती हैं. This very company is going to act, this very bad bank is going to have the backing of the government. Why the ARCs under SARFAESI Act which were formed were not able to help with the NPA problem, because the NPA problem is such mammoth and the ARC's funding is very small. And thereafter, we've also seen how this bad bank is going to work, how the system of security receipts is going to work, and how professional management will be done with respect to these resources in the form that these will be managed by India Debt Resolution Company, which would be the operational entity of the asset reconstruction company, National Asset Reconstruction Company, also known as the bad bank. Then we know the challenges. No scheme is devoid of challenges. Challenges would be raising capital in this very downturn of economy. Then we also need to see that the underlying issues, banking reforms are taking place. Price discovery is going to be a big challenge, and the moral hazard should be addressed by alternate measures. Success lies in proper implementation and management. That is all from today from my side. Should you have any doubts, feel free to put your doubts in the comment section. Thank you and have a nice day.